just strapped you down on a gurney, slapped on the electrodes, and shot you full of juice. And a lot of people would arch. I mean, it's a completely it's a reflex thing. You have a jolt of electricity go through your muscles are going to tighten, and people would buck against these gurneys and against these arm holds and leg holds, and they would break bones.
Yeah, and I also read...
Because of the force of the electricity going through. Now, what we did is we put the patients into kind of like a twilight sleep. It was basically an insulin coma. But we put the patients under before administering the shock therapy.
Uh-huh.
That was a much gentler way to do it. And then when the shock therapy had been administered properly, we brought them out of the insulin coma.
Yeah.
No broken bones, no bruises, no trauma.
And no deaths. That's another thing I was reading. Back in the early 1900s, there was a lot of deaths when they started doing the shock treatments. I mean, people with bad hearts and you name it. And so then...
Yeah, disrupt the heart rhythm, it's boom.
Oh, yeah, they're dead. And maybe that's why in some places they're haunted, too, from that reason, this alone, Oh,
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that patient did not have to die.
Right. So actually, if you think about it, it's not talking about the guest place you're talking about, but some of the other ones, I mean, I think there would be a lot of paranormal activity around because of what was done to the patients, let alone, I think it'd be almost as bad as a prison.
In some cases it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Just as bad because it's just as senseless.
Wow. So what have you encountered at that hospital?
Oh, boy. I have had so many wonderful experiences at the Peoria State Hospital. It's one of my favorite places to be because you can almost feel the contentment on the grounds. Because we'll do a little bit more history, and then we'll move on to the actual ghost stories. Dr. Zeller was he was very invested in empowering women. He felt that the gentle hand of a woman was much more effective in treating the mentally ill than the hard hand of a man. And he found that on the male wards, if a woman was in charge, and he pointed this out in his testimony before the House of Representatives too, they were absolutely stunned that a woman was in charge of every single one of these wards. And he realized that the men were cleaner, they would listen better, they were more attentive because the women reminded them of their mothers.
Yeah, or their wives.
So they were much better behaved. So yeah, he was very interested in empowering women. He had the finest nurses' college in the country for 36 years. And he encouraged his nurses to go on to become doctors in their own right. He would go around to classrooms, high school classrooms in Peoria, and he would lecture to young women. And he would say, if you want to be a lawyer, go out and be a lawyer. If you want to be a nurse, come to my asylum. I will train you in the care of patients. You want to be a doctor? We'll help you go on and become a physician. This was before women could vote.
Oh, yeah.
So he was very interested in empowering women. And I think that spirit lives on the grounds, because once you've been to the Peoria State Hospital, you keep feeling a pull to return, and that seems especially powerful for women. We have a lot of male volunteers there, but the number of women volunteers that we have that just devote weekends and hours just to helping out at the hospital is astounding.
Oh, wow.
So, and we all, I've talked to so many female volunteers, and they all say, I can't explain it, but it's just a pull. This is such a peaceful place. I just want to be here.
Yeah, and you'd think the opposite, you know. I would think like like I was mentioning, a mental institution, would be so much pain and turmoil, and
Yeah.
suffering and all that stuff. But from what you're saying, this doctor had a complete new approach to how
Oh,
to
yes.
treat the mental ill. That I guess they had a lot of happy campers there. I mean, from
Yes.
there's no other way to say it. So I
Yes.
guess
Yes.
the ghosts would be happy. I mean, but
Hmm.
wouldn't they go ascend to the next level rather than hang around if they were? Maybe they loved it so much. You said earlier they loved it so much they didn't want to leave. So when they died, that's where they're at.
Right. Right. I do believe a lot of them choose to stay. I have met at least one who is able to go back and forth. Um, I spend a lot of time in, okay, and there were 63 buildings on the hilltop at the asylum's height. 12 of those buildings are left. One of them, the Pollock Hospital, is still in its original state. That is the one building that is left that is devoted to historical tours and to paranormal investigation. All the other buildings have been repurposed into, restaurants and bars and churches and whatnot, and dentist's
Uh-huh.
office. Um,
Now
so you can't investigate those.
were these big buildings, or or
Some of them are. The Pollock Hospital was the former tuberculosis ward. There is one of the cottages that, I mean, I say cottage and you think of a little tiny building, but these were the size of McMansions. These were designed to house dozens of patients. One of those got turned into a dentist's office.
uh-huh.
There is the Octagon building, which is now an office building, and that's pretty active too. I talked to somebody who worked there who had stories to share. But I spend most of my time at the Pollock Hospital.
Uh-huh.
And downstairs in the cold storage room, people used to call it the morgue, but a morgue specifically is a place where autopsies are performed. And there were no autopsies performed down there. It was simply a place to store bodies until they were able to be taken on the train home to their families.
Uh-huh.
Much more, probably about 3/4 of the people that passed away on the hilltop were sent home to family plots. We have 4 cemeteries on the grounds. There are 1,432 people buried on the grounds.
Wow, can you repeat that
Um,
number again?
I'm hoping I'm getting it right. It's there. I know there's some. 1,000. It's not 1/4. I think it is 1,432 people.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in those 4 cemeteries. But most of the people were sent home to family plots, and that's one of the places they were stored, because the basement of the Pollock Hospital is actually built on 3 feet of a natural spring. So it stays very cool in the summer, and it stays downright frigid in the winter.
I bet it would. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. No
so we spend a
refrigeration
lot of
equipment.
time in the morgue. Um, and there is a spirit down there that I encountered several years ago through the use of a spirit box or ghost box. He told us his name was Christopher.
Okay, not to interrupt you. Some
Uh-huh.
people out there don't know what a spirit or a ghost box is. So why don't you explain
Okay,
that, what that is,
I
and how
most
it works?
certainly will. I would be delighted to. A ghost box or spirit box or Frank's box is also affectionately referred to as a shack hack, because what it is in its simplest form is an AM radio, not a lot of music, a lot of talking, that is set up to scroll through the dial very quickly. It only lands on uh, an actual station every second, second and a half. It keeps scanning, and what it's doing is putting out a lot of white noise.
Uh-huh.
And the theory is that the spirits can take that energy and take that white noise and take those snippets of sound and use them to communicate. You can ask a question and you can hopefully get an answer in real time.
Well,
And it's fascinating.
I've heard a couple, or seen it on YouTube where,
Yeah.
where they asked a question and, it would come back and it sounded like it was just like going through the stations really fast, but
Uh-huh.
you'd hear an answer.
I I
And
know.
that is so awesome and scary at the same time, I tell you.
It was so cool. But the first time I ever saw one in action was at the Pollock Hospital. And they explained it to me. They explained the concept to me. And I'm like, I call shenanigans. You mean to tell me this is a thing? And then they turned it on. We started asking questions and we started getting actual answers. And it blew my mind. It was
wow.
so awesome.
Oh, did you ever? On this bad joke. I was going to say, did anybody ever ask for a cigarette on one? But that's sorry. I just had to throw that in.
That's the other thing, and I'm not going to drop any nasty bombs on the air. But that's the other thing about the ghost box, that you realize that yes, there are spirits talking with you, is because sometimes you get 4-letter words out of it.
Oh, yeah.
You get F-bombs. You get people. I myself was called a rhymes with witch.
And they didn't even know you.
I know. That's what I told them. I called them out on it. I said, look, I'm just trying to communicate here. You're calling me that? And then the ghost box said, I guess not.
Oh, wow. That I mean, I used to be in broadcasting. I just got back into it after about 35 years not being in it. But I used to do a talk show, and then I was a DJ for Top 40 format stuff. But, I know, and I was an amateur radio operator at 10 years old, so I know electronics. Mm-hmm. And just to think, you ask a question and you get a thing back. The odds are so millions and millions of one it ever happening. So that tells me there's something out there that actually is picking up the, and responding. I mean, something's there and is answering your question. And that's the scary part.
Isn't it fascinating?
And why I threw up the cigarette thing? I listened to a tape on YouTube where the ghost hunters were in a cemetery. And when they played the recording back, they were walking, I guess, past a grave, and somebody goes, "Do you have a cigarette?" So, I mean, I guess if somebody's a heavy chain smoker, maybe, they're dying they can't be dying. They're already dead, but they're wanting a cigarette of some sort, or just
old habits are hard to break.
Yeah, bad habit.
Well, I'll put in a quick little plug here because we're on the subject of it. The neat thing about Fractured Spirits, Hauntings at the Peoria State Hospital, about that particular book, is that I tried to make it interactive. I tried to make it multimedia. I came up with so many of these recordings that people shared with me, recordings that I had made myself, that I decided to put them into the book. If you get yourself a copy of Fractured Spirits.
And where can they get that? Where can they find it?
It's on Amazon. Uh-huh. It can also be found at Crossroad Press. They're the ones that publish Fractured Spirits.
Okay.
Amazon's a great place to get it. Or you can go to any local bookstore and they'll be able to order it for you too. So support your local bookstore. Yay.
Yeah, you should. You hear that, people? Yes. Do that.
Yes, support your local bookstore. So if you get yourself a copy, and you're flipping through it, and you see a little cartoon ghosty in the margin, that's your signal that there's extra stuff on the internet. You can either go to the Fractured Spirits fan page on Facebook, or you can go to sylviaschultz.com, and you can actually click on that. It's set up to tell you which page goes with which sound file. Uh-huh. So you can hear this ghost box calling me an unpleasant name and me calling them out and them saying, well, I guess not. And you can also hear my very first interaction with the spirit in the basement of the Pollock Hospital that we know as Christopher.
And what was that?
Oh, goodness. So standing around in the basement using the ghost box. This was the end of April, so it was still pretty chilly in the building. I was standing there holding my recorder in my right hand, and my left hand was kind of down at my side.